本集节目由永丰金控冠名赞助，翻转金融，共创美好生活，以新闻开启国际视野，永丰金控与您一同掌握全球脉动。大家好，欢迎收听联合开炮，我是郭崇伦。台北政经学院基金会在5号跟6号在国家图书馆举行了政治经济全球秩序与世界发展的国际学术研讨会，邀请了全世界知名的10几位专家学者讨论全球性的大趋势的这些问题。其中一位参加的人是谢长泰博士。谢博士他出生在台湾，但是2岁的时候就跟家人迁居，先到新加坡，然后到伊朗、巴拉圭。对于全球化他有非常亲身的体验。他在加州大学伯克莱分校取得经济学博士以后，现在是芝加哥大学商学院的讲座教授，也是当选的时候是最年轻的中央研究院的院士。我在会议的空暇的时候访问他，谈中国经济发展跟政治控制的两难，还有美国对于中国的科技上的限制，以及台湾在2强竞争下的处境。我首先问他，他在讨论的时候提到，他并不同意现在流行的看法，认为中国大陆是在反经济发展，甚至是反企业的。最近对付马云的阿里巴巴或者是马化腾的腾讯，其实是有一个逻辑在。以下是访问内容。
Actually, I want to have a talk with you exactly because I was listening your presentation yesterday, and it's quite interesting. So I was thinking maybe I can have a talk with you and elaborate more on that.
Okay.
First of all, you mentioned that you think that China is not discouraging the private enterprise. Rather, they are encouraging small and medium enterprise. And also, they are welcoming and encourage more foreign investment. This somehow is against the general impression. You get the question from the floor as well, right? They question whether they are generally welcoming the foreign investment. Are you still stand by what you say, or they may have some changes happening right now?
I mean, this is the way I see it. It's that they want to have political control.
Right.
So the first part of political control is I think what we all understand well, right? Which is to basically eliminate all the threats to their political control.
Right.
But then the other important piece to their political control and also to their political legitimacy is that they also need to have economic growth.
Right.
They also need to have economic growth. Like a really important part to their legitimacy is that they can claim, look what we've done in the last 40 years. Like look at where China was in 1978. Look at where China is now, and if you stick with us, the Communist Party, this is what we can do. Okay. The question is, and I try to lay out is, how do you reconcile these two things? Which is, and think about that. These are two different elements, or these are the two ingredients of political control, right? Which is that because you can see the tension that it runs into this conflict. So maybe a way to think about it is suppose that TSMC is a Chinese company, right? And suppose that, say, somebody like Morris, right? So if you think about Morris, his status here, his words have influence,
right?
People listen to him, right? Now imagine that this is that this was China, right? That this was China. Somebody like Morris would be considered to be a political threat, because when he says something, people respect him, right? People respect him and they listen to him, right? So then what happens then if you were to eliminate the political threat implied by Morris, but then you also lose the Chinese equivalent of TSMC, right? Which also is very damaging, right? So then this is how, and I think that it's all about just constantly calibrating how you're going to get these two things, right? So what I've seen is, I think, is what I've said, right? What I've said, which is that at the same time that you have seen this crackdown, you also see at the same time sort of this campaign to make things better for the small and medium-sized firms. And I think that for the most part, also for the foreign firms. But that does not mean that the foreign firms are going to go in, are going to go in because there's this legitimate fear of, yes, you are improving conditions for me right now, but wait. What did you just do to Jack Ma? What did you just do to Jack Ma? Are you going to do that to me? Right. So there's no debate. I think that a lot of foreign firms are scared, right? Are scared because of what they've been doing to the big private Chinese firms. At the same time, the Chinese authorities, I think what I see is that they're trying really hard to say, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. That's Jack Ma, and he's a monopolist or whatever. And then a lot of people legitimately don't quite believe it. They don't quite believe what you're saying. They don't believe that. So it's almost like so then there's an open question about whether the strategy will work. Maybe it's like, just to draw a crude analogy, you have a husband that's been cheating on the wife for the last 2 years, and then the husband says, no, okay, from now on it's over, and then I'm not going to be I'm no longer going to have an affair. You can well understand why the wife is not going to believe the husband, right? Because once you've done it, so I guess I would separate these two questions on whether foreign firms feel fearful, which I think they do, versus what the party is trying to do for the private firms, right? Because I think that objectively the conditions for the private foreign firms have gotten better, but the fear element has gone up, right? So that this fear of what they of being caught up in the next crackdown, and part of that problem is that, and this is just goes to maybe the issue of governance of the Communist Party, is that they never make clear exactly what they're doing. Right, so they can never say, this is only for these industries, this is only for Jack Ma, and this is the reason we're doing it, and you are not affected by this, right? So they can never make clear what exactly they're doing, and because they cannot make clear what they're doing, it's this ambiguity makes this fear factor just a lot more just.
Let me ask you, is it true that we are seeing two kinds of logic here? One is the business and economic logic, the other would be political logic, and the political logic always trump the economic logic in the case of China.
Yes, but you also need to have some of that business and economic logic, because because the political logic also demands that you deliver economic growth.
I agree. Right. Right. So is it, we can put an analogy just like a pandemic, the lockdown. I mean, we see that over the past years, there have been fierce debate whether we should have an opening up or we should keep the lockdown. That debate had been going on until after the 20th Party Congress. Then all of a sudden they decided to open up. So there's a very strong demand that now the Chinese economy suffer greatly. We should lift the restriction, we should open up. But on the other hand, there's still a very strong concern about the pandemic and whether we should still keep the lid on and until after the 20th Party Congress. Is that there's a similar kind of analogy here?
Almost. I would say that the concern has never really been about the pandemic.
Okay.
Like if I think about 2022, sort of what you're describing, I don't think the concern was ever really about the pandemic. It's about trying to maintain the narrative that the Communist Party does things better than the rest of the world. And they cannot, before that, the Party Congress, they cannot say that, no, we were wrong doing this. So they have to keep that narrative. To maintain that narrative, and after the Party Congress is over, then you no longer need to keep up that narrative. So I mean, maybe another way to ask your question would be that. So I think that the end point in that case was always the 20th Party Congress, right? A question that you can ask is, suppose the Party Congress did not take place in October of 2022, but it was going to take place in October of 2024. Right? Suppose I was going to, would they have kept it for that long?
Right.
And then I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I suspect that if sort of the length of time was much larger, I think that my guess is that they would have lifted the restrictions earlier. I think that they would have come up with with a narrative, because they've got to appear. It's all about sort of their domestic messaging, the messaging to their people. The messaging is that we are a better system. Look at how well we did in 2020. Look at 1 million people died in the U.S. It's a decadent country. It's falling behind. We are on the rise, and that's the narrative that they've got to give. So it's not. So to go back to the question that you asked, is it that politics always triumphs over economics? I guess the answer is yes, but it's not that simple, right? Because politics also involves the economics.
Right. Let me ask you, come back to the foreign investment again. Now they want to encourage foreign investment back, but except all the factors we discussed before, there's concern that whether China will keep opening up. For instance, whether the foreign own can be up to like more than 50%, or there's certain area who used to be restricted for foreign investment that can open up again. So do you think that they will keep opening up and loosen these restrictions, or there's it's not something that you can pinpoint? It's always fluid, that the only concern they have is whether that will threaten the party control or not.
I don't think they feel that foreign firms are a threat. I don't think are a threat to their political are a threat to their political control. I don't think it is. In terms of the loosening of restrictions, I think there's this mindset now that they will do whatever it takes within certain constraints in order to get foreign firms investing again in China. In terms of the lifting of the restrictions, my expectation is that they will do it on a case-to-case basis. But that's my sense. Like I'll give you one example, that it always has been the case that if you're a car company and you want to set up in China, you always have to do it through a joint venture partner. Right. That's the way. So that's the way that Toyota operates in China, or GM or Ford. They all operate through these joint venture partners. Obviously, GM and Toyota don't like it. Right. They rather for them it's a cost. Right, and also these joint venture partners, they also run their own car company.
Right.
So it's almost like doing a joint venture with your competitor. Right. I mean that's the structure. Okay. But then, in 2018 or so, when they were trying to recruit Tesla said, "We won't come if you insist that we do a joint venture partner. Mm-hmm. If you will offer through a joint venture partner." So Tesla played hardball, and they were of the view that Tesla is something different, right? It's not a Toyota, that it's the wave of the future. It's the leading EV company. EV is the wave of the future, so they were thinking about it the same way that everybody in the world thinks about, that there's going to be a car revolution, and if you jump onto the wagon, you will be at the forefront of the revolution. If not, you will be left behind. So they made an exception for Tesla. So Tesla is the only car company that operates in China, and it's 100% owned by Tesla. They do not have a JV partner. So they made it's a one-time exception. It's a one. So just to say, my guess is that if at some point, I see it as completely unlikely, but if, say, TSMC wanted to set up a 2 nanometer chip plant in China somewhere, it's not going to happen. It's not going to. But if they said they wanted to do it, the Chinese government is going to do is basically going to do whatever TSMC wants. Right? It's going to roll out the red carpet, whatever TSMC asks for, they're going to get it. It's not going to make it a general rule. I think it's going to make it. They're going to do it as a TSMC specific rule, right? That all these special conditions only apply to you, right? Because you're special, right? Or there's a perception that you have something unique, right?
That brings me to my next question, which is there's domestic investment, there's foreign investment, but there's a third category, which is investment from Taiwan and Hong Kong. So do you think their treatment of this Hong Kong Taiwan investment would be more like international investment, or they would treat it more like domestic investment in terms of protection or the restriction being lifted?
From what I've seen is that they treat it like foreign investment. I mean, from what I've seen, that they roll out the red carpet. They roll out the red carpet for Taiwanese investors. That does not mean that Taiwanese investors are responding to it. I mean, that's a separate question, right? Because Taiwanese investors are looking at the trade war, they're looking at everything else, and they say, well, given everything, despite the red carpet, I don't want to go there. I would rather go somewhere else. But in terms of what I think the Chinese are trying to do, is that I think that they are trying as hard as they can to make conditions better for Taiwanese firms. Of course, Taiwanese companies are fearful, and a lot of them have left.
Right.
A lot of them, but it's not because of what the Chinese. There, I think it's not because of what the Chinese are doing. It's just the fear of, what is going to be the next phase of the U.S.-China trade war, and what's going to happen. What's my access to market if I were to continue to produce in China? What if there's another COVID lockdown? What if all these things that have happened? It's no longer the reliable business environment that it used to be.
So let's bring back to what you have said yesterday about the U.S. restriction on China. You are saying that after October last year, it's become a restriction across the board. But are they going to have some change? I mean, what I'm sensing is they used to talk about there's a dangerous trend of decoupling, now they are more using the European terms, which is de-risk. I think National Security Advisor Sullivan had made a speech, and he talked more about de-risk more than decoupling. And do you think that they're going to choose and pick some of the things that the U.S. will consider that were harmful for their national security, instead of banning across the board that will hurt the U.S. Own economy in that sense?
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to do a ban across the board. So I think they're just going to pick and choose on when they're going. I think that it's going to be that they are going to pick and choose on technologies and sectors that they view as potentially harmful to national security.
Okay.
Right. The question is whether they have such an expansive definition of national security, that is, where do you draw the line? Like,
right.
What exactly is, when is something national security? When is something not?
Right.
For example, is medical equipment national security? Right. Mm-hmm. You could define it. As national security. Are solar panels national security?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's hard to make the case of national security, but if you don't define what national security is, you could just say that everything. It's almost like it's. I guess maybe another way to put it is that. Think about the Hong Kong national security law. One of the problems of national security law is that they never define what national security is. So they could define it however they want, right? They could, as long as they don't like it, then they could say, well, this is what you're doing is a violation of, it violates the Hong Kong national security law. Well, if they don't define it, and they're the ones that get that define what national security is, then it's almost meaningless, right? And that's sort of the issue with the U.S. that with the U.S.'s definition of national security, that it's never defined, and they could define it any way they want, right?
But it seems now the trend is continue. I mean, now there's law, there's in the Congress that they're going to pass on restricting the U.S. investment in China. Right. I mean, this is something that is not heard of before, right?
Yeah, it's unheard of. No, that's right. So that isn't heard of. The October rules are unheard of, and I think that it's just going to grow. I think it's just going to grow. All right. I think that the speech or whatever by Jake Sullivan is that they said, I think the analogy he gave was that what we intend to do is to, it's not decoupling. We're going to create these gardens in which we're going to wall off these gardens. I think that what's going to happen is that there are going to be more and more gardens. Right? Right now, it is just semiconductors. Next, it's going to be AI.
Right.
Then it's going to be biotech.
Right.
So it's whatever. Again, it's just whatever they feel is national security.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So how is the business? How is the enterprise going to do business if it's facing with this kind of situation?
Yeah, you just don't go. Right?
China is such a huge market. I mean,
yeah, it's a huge market, and then you have to decide whether you want to serve. I mean, it's effectively the same choice that TSMC was faced with.
Right.
Which is
right.
You could say the same thing. It was a big market for TSMC, and they were faced with a choice. Well, do you want that market, or do you want the American market? Mm-hmm. And they decided, as you know, decided they wanted ideally they want both.
Right,
They want
right,
both, but
right.
when they're forced to choose, they chose the American market. They're probably not happy about it. I don't know what they've said publicly. And knowing the company, they don't like to complain publicly. So my guess is that they haven't complained about the U.S. export controls. Is that true? Have they complained about it in public?
They complained about all kinds of demands that if TSMC want to invest in the United States,
that's
they
about
want
the
financial.
That's right. That's about the rules of the CHIPS Act. But in terms of the export controls that basically restrict their activities in China, have they complained about that? No. My guess is that they haven't. Right.
They try to get some waiver out of this. But since they are plugging all the holes on the waivers, they are not complaining, right? Is there additional geopolitical risk for Taiwan business? I mean, besides the thing we have just mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of people here are concerned whether China is going to attack Taiwan, what's going to be the result of the next year's presidential election here, so on and so forth. What would your suggestion be? Those kind of geopolitical or political risks.
I mean, it's a very dangerous situation now. I mean, it's a very dangerous. This is the tension, right? The tension is that there is no way, right now, there is no scenario in which there can be an agreement that satisfies what Taiwan wants and what Taiwan needs, which is its sovereignty, and what the Chinese want. There's no way in which I can see to do that. So what's the solution? I mean, the solution is to basically not have a solution, right? To just continue this ambiguous situation where neither side is happy, but at the same time, but there's no resolution to the problem, right? That I think is really, although it's very unsatisfying to the Taiwanese, very unsatisfying to the Chinese as well, and because both sides want to have a resolution, but they want a resolution on their terms, right? on their terms. So given that, I think that the best case scenario is to basically push for a situation where there never is a resolution, or to keep on postponing, to say, okay, today is not the day where we're going to resolve the Taiwan question. Let's do it tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, they say, not today. Let's do it tomorrow. So just keep on. I understand how frustrating this is, but I don't see that. That seems sort of the most likely. I think the only scenario in which Taiwan can still survive, which is just to keep on postponing this. Now, what are the threats to that, right? The threats to that are twofold. Is that there seems that, so the threat comes, the first, there's a political threat to that, and the political threat is coming from American politics, which is pushing, there's this push in the US among American politicians to have a resolution of the Taiwan question, right? And there also, as you know, political forces in Taiwan, they also want a resolution, right? A resolution. Now, the problem with pushing that is that you could get to the point where the Chinese say, okay, let's resolve this. And we know what's going to happen, right? So this is the question for another day. I don't think the way they're going to do it is that, I don't think that it's going to be a military attack. I think it's going to be a lot more subtle. I think that they're, for example, going to threaten, they may not even impose a blockade. They can just threaten a blockade, right? And what that's going to do is that you don't actually have to do the blockade. By threatening a blockade, you basically raise insurance rates up through the roof so that the carriers are not going to be willing to ship. So that effectively does it, and you don't have to do anything. It's just a threat. So there are lots of things that sort of short of military action that they can do, which is going to be very damaging for Taiwan, right? The other part of the threat is that, think about so there's no question what Xi Jinping wants. The question is, think about every morning he wakes up and he would love to be able to take over Taiwan. Like, that's his final piece. That's a final piece in his project of what he calls the rejuvenation of the Chinese people, the Chinese nation. Then think about, okay, he wakes up in the morning and he thinks, is today the day in which I'm going to do it?
Maybe not today.
And then the question is, what is going to get him to say, okay, today's the day in which I'm going to do it, right? So he's going to think about, okay, if I win, I'm going to go into the pantheon of great Chinese leaders that restore the dignity and the power of the great Chinese nation. I'm finally going to solve the 100 years of humiliation. I'm going to right the wrong of the war that China had with Japan, and we lost Taiwan because I understand, regardless of what the true story is, that is the narrative, right? That is the narrative in China. What's the cost? The cost of doing this is that A, I could lose. Number two is that I think that he understands very well, is that if he decides that today is the day, he's going to basically he's going to lose all, sort of his access to world markets is going to be cut. Foreign direct investment is going to dry up. He's going to lose sort of everything that the Chinese economy has gained from being open and access to the world, right? Now, think about the following scenario, that the politics of the U.S. continues the way it does, okay? Jake Sullivan continues to build more and more gardens, right? And suppose that right now it's one garden, suppose it goes to 50 gardens and 100 gardens. Once you get to 100 gardens, one morning Xi Jinping wakes up and he said, is this the day in which I'm going to do it? Well, okay, the cost is that I lose access to foreign direct investments, I lose access to world markets. Then he says, how much do I lose? Well, there are already 100 gardens. So I'm not getting anything, right? They're already blocking me. So if you were to increase it from, how many more gardens do you have, right? So the threat is that the U.S. is going to build more gardens. Well, you already have 100. If you go to 120, so that's the risk, right? That's a risk of what the U.S. is doing, right? Of sort of this path that the U.S. is on. That I think that it makes the danger faced by Taiwan just even more serious. Mm-hmm. So anyway,
that's not a very positive note.
But that's where things are going. I mean,
right. I understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I say that the big change is that it always, in the past, it's been the U.S. that has been at the forefront of engagement with China. That's been at the forefront of basically, let me just say, like if I think about what the U.S. did during the administration by Chen Shui-bian, which is to say, look, don't do crazy things. Mm-hmm. Don't do crazy. Don't give them an excuse. Although,
right.
President Chen really wanted to, right? He really wanted to. This time, it almost feels like it's exactly the opposite.
Right.
It's the U.S. that really wants to do crazy things, and although I don't think Taiwan has really said anything publicly, I think that Taiwan is getting more and more uncomfortable with what the U.S. is trying to what the U.S. is trying to do. It's almost like, it's been this remarkable shift, right? Like where it's the U.S. politicians that are now behaving crazily. And it's because I think there's been a big shift in American politics.
Right. Thank you very much
Sure.
for your time and your thought.
Okay, all right.
谢谢各位收听，我们下次见。
上网搜寻 VIP.udn.com 到联合报数位版，看更多精彩的报道。